Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special podcast to launch the Kingston Business Journal. I'm your host, Michael Curran. In this podcast, we will preview the premier issue of Kingston Business Journal, a sister publication to the Ottawa Business Journal. This new in print digital edition has just launched, and we've got a great lineup of guests with us today to explore this project. First up, we'll have the editor responsible for this new publication. Next, we'll speak with the head of Kingston Economic Development, and finally, the leader of Kingston's tourism agency. Stick with us, and you'll get a good glimpse into Kingston's local economy. Let's get things started with the person who led this project. Here is the editor-in-chief of the Kingston Business Journal, Anne Howland. Hey, Anne.
Hi, Mike. Good to see you.
Good. Thanks for joining us today, and congrats on the new project. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure. So as you mentioned, it's our very first issue of the Kingston Business Journal, and we wanted to shine a spotlight on the business community in Kingston. There's so many, fascinating aspects to the business community there: super retail, hospitality, tourism, all the way to manufacturing and innovation and research that comes out of the colleges and universities and many facilities around the city. So there's a whole gamut of stuff to talk about, not only in terms of great opportunities and advancements, but also some of the challenges they're facing as well.
Okay, that's great. And what are some of the stories that really stood out to you when you were working on the project?
Sure. Well, speaking of challenges, we've been following the situation with the LaSalle Causeway for some time now. So that's been a real challenge for the city, for the residents in general, and also for many businesses. Not only the marine operators whose tourism season was affected, but also downtown businesses seeing a reduction in foot traffic to their shops and restaurants. So it's been a real problem, and it sounds like it could be quite a challenge going forward, potentially for many years. So that was one. Another one that caught my eye was we wrote about a new downtown foot patrol police officer. And this person's salary is actually being partially paid by businesses in the downtown BIA because they have a concern with crime and safety in the downtown. And they saw this as a useful initiative. And by the statistics we've seen from the Kingston Police Service, it looks like this initiative is having some good results. It resonated with me as the editor of the Ottawa Business Journal because, of course, we're seeing many of these same issues in our Byward Market and in Centertown in general. So that was the second. And then the third, I think, as a former Queen's student, was the whole issue around homecoming. It kind of depends who you talk to on this one, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Certainly from the economic viewpoint and the business community viewpoint, they see it as a great boon to their business and to activity in the city, which of course it is, but also it comes with some challenges as well in terms of the crime and safety and security and just a big event happening in a relatively small city.
It, as you mentioned, and you spent some time in Kingston. You were a Queen's student. You did your MBA there. And when I think of Kingston, it almost seems like many people's second hometown. People go to school there. Many military people are posted there. RMC is there. When you kind of zoom out after working on this project for a bit, and what's your overall sense of what's happening in Kingston from an economic perspective?
Yeah. It's fascinating, right? You're absolutely right. There's the military presence. Of course, there used to be a giant penitentiary virtually in the middle of the city. So there's many aspects to Kingston. I think, my impression is, like many communities, unfortunately, that Kingston is struggling with crime and safety, security, drug use, homelessness. So these are, obviously difficult topics to deal with. And of course, the businesses are feeling the effects. And I talked about the downtown police officer. So that's one result. Another interesting one where Kingston is concerned is transportation. So the LaSalle Causeway is obviously a transportation issue, but as we point out in one of our articles, Kingston is sort of ideally situated between many big cities, and yet it's not always obvious how to get in and out of the city and then around the city when you're actually in it. And then I think, we read that hybrid work too is having an effect on the Kingston downtown. And that's causing a problem with fewer people coming downtown, as we see in Ottawa and many other cities around the world, really. However, my impression is Kingston remains an absolutely charming city. It's a fantastic place to visit. It's a great tourism spot. There's amazing restaurants and retail shops. So some of the things that are going on the tourism front are really fantastic too. So to my mind, it's still kind of it's a smaller city that often has to deal with larger city issues. And so that's what's made it so fascinating to cover from a journalist perspective.
Yeah, well put. It's not immune to some of the economic and social issues that are being experienced in other cities, both small and large in Canada. But at the same time, I think I agree with you that there's a strength in the underpinning of the economy with Queens and St. Lawrence and military presence and growing startup scene and all that type of stuff. It's a really fascinating place that will keep on following. And I want to thank you for the project and thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks, Mike.
All right. That was Anne Howland, the editor-in-chief of Kingston Business Journal. And I'll be giving you a little bit more information how you can access either the printed or digital edition of Kingston Business Journal in just a few minutes. Hang on for that. Before we speak to the head of Kingston Economic Development, we have a short video about a UK-based carbon removal company that was just launched operations in the Kingston area. Let's roll that video now.
We all know that climate change is having a dramatic impact on the planet and on our way of lives. We're going to need to remove somewhere around 5 to 10 billion tons of CO2 from our atmosphere every year.
Kingston is a community that's passionate about sustainability. We were the first city in Ontario to declare a climate emergency.
Wollastonite is a calcium silicate mineral. It reacts with CO2 that's in the rainwater, and it sequesters that into carbonates which get put into the soil permanently. Undo developed some wonderful technology to measure, record, and verify the actual carbon that's been put into the ground.
We need projects like Canadian Wollastonite and Undo to achieve our goals.
Rural Ontario plays such a large role on the overall economy and in the world. This relationship with Wollastonite and Undo is truly an example of what partnerships are about that will be successful. It will be an incredible win for everyone.
We're actually going to be a net environmental gain. We're going to contribute more to the environment than we're taking away.
From the minute you drive through the gates and you see the Inukshuk and you see the wetlands and you see the natural landscape that welcomes nature and birding.
The potential for Canada to be removing hundreds of millions of tons per year is very real. We're building out a scalable, permanent removal system that will take some of that CO2 back out of the atmosphere to help us keep a stable planet for future generations.
Kingston's very proud to be home to Undo, and we're pleased to work with them every step of the way.
Welcome to Kingston.
Welcome to Kingston.
Welcome to Kingston.
Welcome, Undo.
Welcome, Undo.
What a fascinating addition to Kingston's business scene. Listen, if you want to get to the lay of the land in any city, it's always a good bet to speak with officials in economic development. Not only do they carefully track the success of local businesses, they often get a glimpse into the future. In fact, they help plan the future in many ways. For that reason, we're very pleased to welcome the CEO of Kingston Economic Development. Here is Donna Gillespie. Hello, Donna.
Hello, Michael. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Listen, we're going to start off with something really basic. I'm keen to talk about Undo, by the way, but let's do the basics. Tell us about Kingston Economic Development in case there's someone that doesn't know of the organization. I think they should, by the way.
Of course. So Kingston Economic Development, we're an arm's length agency from the city of Kingston. We're funded by 3 levels of government, and our core focus is to support startups and entrepreneurs along their path, support our existing business base to retain, help them expand, and becoming more important these days is the transition as we have retiring small, medium enterprises. And then our third key portfolio is the attraction of new investment into the city.
Fascinating. And Donna, you've had a great run at Kingston Economic Development. In fact, if I remember correctly, you won an award recently for your performance in that role. So congratulations.
Thank
Um,
you.
but you have been there for approximately 15 years. I think it's a little bit more than that. Tell us about how the role of economic development in Kingston has evolved over those years.
Well, I'm starting to feel dated. I would say economic development, and this isn't specific to Kingston, but it's across the board. It's really changing in that our communities are much more diverse. So often it falls back on the Economic Development Office to look at how do we fill gaps for underrepresented groups? How do we make connections for newcomers into our communities? So over the past few years, we've been fortunate to be able to launch a Young Professionals Network, the Southeastern Ontario Black Entrepreneurs Organization, different ways for communities to come together. And then that helps spur connections and collisions and entrepreneurial ideas.
Really neat. And I think, you're right. By the way, it's generally true, what I'm about to say too, of other cities. There was a point in time, if you go back 20 years ago, where economic development was very much about trying to attract businesses to relocate. And it seems to me that economic development is a lot more broad-based, as you said, whether that's, cultivating startups or welcoming maybe immigrant entrepreneurs. Donna, if you were to bump into someone, let's say you were traveling on a trip or you're hosting a foreign trade mission coming to Kingston, how would you describe the local economy?
Kingston's economy is very stable, and I was fortunate just this morning to see an email from the city treasurer that talks about us maintaining our Standard & Poor's AA+ credit rating for the community. And that's in part because we have a very stable economy anchored by a strong public sector. But for the first time in 2024, our private sector employment numbers surpassed the public, which is really exciting for us. And it shows growth in our small, medium enterprises primarily. And I believe it's the private sector that drives innovation and GDP growth.
That's really interesting. That's a massive milestone that you've just hit then. Kingston, a little bit like Ottawa, as you said, has been kind of dependent on those government jobs and institutions, things like the military and municipalities and hospitals and that type of stuff. But the private sector, as you just indicated, is now eclipsed from an employment perspective, that public sector. Where are you seeing the growth? What sectors are driving that growth, Donna?
We're seeing a lot of growth these days in the manufacturing community. It was heartening in the summer to see two significant announcements of local manufacturers expanding their operations, IPG Photonics and Cancoil Thermal. So these are anchors in our local manufacturing community. We also, just in the past month, officially welcomed Canada Royal Milk. So while they have been under construction or in an early pre-production phase for a number of years, it was the official grand opening of the infant formula factory.
That's great. That's all potentially due to this onshoring trend. Would you say that's a factor at play here, Donna?
Most certainly. The pandemic. So we talked about how economic development has changed in the past 20 years. We're still coming out of one of the worst economic crises our businesses have ever seen, and met with rising inflation and just universal costs. It's a challenging time for businesses across the sector. But I would say it's the manufacturing and health, life sciences that are really in a growth mode.
Okay, that's great. Let's talk for a minute about Undo. We just saw this great video about a new company that's just relocated to expanded to Kingston, I guess is the accurate way of putting it. They specialize in removing carbon. Tell us a little bit about the Undo story and why they chose Kingston.
Undo is this fantastic win-win-win-win scenario. So Undo looks at recording, monitoring, verifying removal of carbon from the atmosphere. And they're based out of the UK, but they've worked in numerous different countries. And their research showed that a silicate, an aggregate called wollastonite, would help speed up the erosion rock weathering process faster than it would naturally occur. So they were reading research reports found at a university that talked about Canadian wollastonite. So that's a large mineral deposit that straddles the city of Kingston and our neighboring township. So they reached out to Bob Vasily, the owner of the local mine, to talk about potential applications. So they undertook one small pilot, and now they have partnered to do a large-scale spread of wollastonite on our rural farmers' fields to validate the carbon renewal. So it's good for a local business, being Canadian wollastonite. It's good to bring new investment from the UK, and they have a small footprint right now of 10 staff. They're onboarding for the work. It's good for our rural farmers who receive, with the support of City of Kingston, the wollastonite to spread on their fields for free. And wollastonite also has the benefit of improving soil quality and yield. So good for the environment, good for the farmers, good for business.
Yeah, that is a really neat story. You don't often get those too often. So congratulations on that win. We'll start wrapping up here, Donna. But if you were to look into the future, sometimes I say, gaze into a crystal ball and try to inform people about what might be, whether it's trends or sectors that are going to continue to perform well and outpace kind of public sector growth. What should people know about that? What's in the future of Kingston's economic development?
I would say some key areas are Kingston's startup ecosystem. So we have been fortunate for the past 4 years to be ranked the top startup ecosystem in Canada for a city our size, between 100 and 500,000 population. And we consistently punch above our weight for our startups globally. So that's an area I see that Kingston will continue to have strong traction. We're a great city to launch businesses, to pilot, to commercialize new ventures. I would also see that Kingston will continue to be dominant in the health sciences, life sciences area. So looking at cell and genome therapies, regenerative medicines, and then manufacturing. I think Kingston has strong roots with a manufacturing history and will continue to see growth in that area, whether it be as part of the EV battery supply chain, which we have seen strong roots, or chemical technologies, clean tech, such as Undo.
Well, that's great, Donna. Thank you. Sounds like some bright days and interesting projects to follow. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael.
That was Donna Gillespie, the CEO of Kingston Economic Development. We're going to keep things rolling and speak with another important leader in Kingston's local economy. She is close to celebrating her 5th anniversary as the Executive Director of Kingston Accommodation Partners. Please welcome Krista Marie LeClair. Hey, Krista.
Hi, Michael.
Thanks for joining us. It's nice to have a few minutes to chat with you. Let's start off by just explaining what Kingston Accommodation Partners is. I have a guess, but not everyone might not know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Michael. So Kingston Accommodation Partners, also known as CAP to the community, is the hotel association, essentially. So we're made up of members across the city that are owners or general managers of the accommodation sector, again, including inns and B&Bs, motels, hotels, of course, as well. And the university and the college are also members of CAP. And our organization really kind of has a few different purposes and roles in the community. So one is that we are a member association. We provide member services, education opportunities, and all of these pieces for our members. We also work very closely with the City of Kingston on the municipal accommodation tax bylaw. So we work with our members to have the MAT tax remitted to us, and then we work with our community members at Tourism Kingston and the City of Kingston to do marketing and sales and development of tourism products in the city. So really spending those municipal accommodation tax dollars on tourism, which is really great. And then lastly, and probably which takes, sort of most of our time in our office, is that we are an advocacy organization. So we work really closely with all levels of government on behalf of the tourism industry as a whole. So knowing that the accommodation sector is just one part of that, but we rely on other sectors, so attractions, food and beverage, business events, sports, and all of these other tourism pieces. So we work really closely with all levels of government to make sure that they understand the value of tourism as a whole, so that we can all thrive and do well for our community.
That is a long list, Krista. Wow. You guys must be busy over there. That's great. When I think of Kingston, Krista, I think of the tourism sector. It pops to mind right away, and I'm envisioning this beautiful setting, on the St. Lawrence, Lake Ontario. This great history to the place, strong kind of local economy in terms of public sector. You've got some cool assets like Fort Henry. How is the tourism sector performing these days, especially post-pandemic, Krista?
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. And you're right, Kingston is a beautiful tourism destination. And I think what we really like to share is that tourism is all year long. So yes, in the summer, certainly with, the history here and a lot of our attractions, leisure market is big for us, but tourism also includes film and music and sport and business events and travel trade, buses and cruise ships and all of these different pieces. So while leisure is a really big market, so are all of these other tourism entities. And, it's going really strong. Tourism is rebounding. 2023 was a really good record year across the board. I think a lot of pent up demand. I think a lot of people interested in kind of getting out there after the pandemic sort of slowed and experiencing, communities across Canada, and Kingston included, of course. But I think we're still there are some segments that are a bit slower to return, but are still kind of coming back strong. And Kingston's a really great place, and we encourage visitation all year long.
Yeah, I like your comment on that pent up demand. Post the health crisis, everybody was so keen to get out there and see beautiful cities such as Kingston and be with people again. And so many reasons, you're right, to visit Kingston. It's top on many people's list. When you think of the potential, Krista, to grow the sector, where do you see the opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of on my past comment, and then looking ahead, business events is an area where I think Kingston continue to grow. We have some really great meetings and conference spaces in Kingston. And so venues that, hold about 600 people or less. And so, business events, people are coming back. Again, I think with that pent up demand, we're seeing business travelers, kind of travel in a new way that we're calling and sort of framing leisure. So business and leisure kind of combined. People are extending their business trips and having their family join them and all of these types of pieces. And I think Kingston's positioned very well for that. And that being said, we do see that across Southeastern Ontario, there is a bit of a gap there in small to medium sized conference center spaces. And so, on our list of things that, we're hoping to accomplish in Kingston in the next couple of years is a conference center. So it would be about the size to hold about 1,000 delegates. There would be other amenities kind of tied into that. Certainly, the city is at a stage right now where it's out to RFP process. So, that's running its course, and we hope to see, shovels in the ground soon.
Okay. These convention centers are a big deal, of course. Ottawa went through its struggle for, my gosh, years and years and years. So they're not easy to get agreement on, not easy to get funding on. But I think I'm picking up on what you're saying. This could be kind of a game changer. Tourism from a leisure perspective is always kind of been thriving, I suspect. But you're saying there is more potential, to go to a desirable kind of mid-market Ontario city if you had an appropriate convention center. You believe you would attract a lot more events, Krista?
Yeah, definitely, Michael. So I think, we're very well positioned between Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa. And then, of course, looking at New York. And, we're this center space where, businesses that have maybe head offices across that region want to come here. Definitely, businesses across the province and the region, they're looking to a place like Kingston, the size of Kingston, where everything is pretty easily accessible, dining and attractions and doing all these other things. And to be able to meet in a space like this that would be, modern, very, up to standards as far as hybrid meetings and all of the tech needs, in a place like downtown Kingston that's very walkable and accommodations very close by. These are all really great reasons to come and sort of meet in Kingston. And so, yes, I think that we're positioned very well for growth there. And I think another really important point too, and one of the reasons we look at this market very, fondly is that, business travelers, they travel all year long, but often during the shoulder season. So outside of your traditional leisure market times, they stay during the week. Again, a time that sometimes isn't as busy as on weekends. They often stay longer. They often, again, build out their trip and do more while they're here. So I think it's a really interesting market that we need to make sure that Kingston's competitive in.
Sounds very, very, to your point, complementary, right? In terms of that leisure market coming kind of midweek, staying for longer, probably with a pretty healthy per visitor spend, because potentially they've got some, they're on a corporate account. And also it occurs to me, of course, Krista, that you're the perfect distance, right? So whether it's Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Upper New York State, it's perfect for those meeting organizers that want to get out of their city, but not necessarily jump on a plane and travel 5 hours. So it sounds like you're checking lots of boxes there, Krista. So we'll watch that. And I know it's difficult, as I said, in these convention centers, meeting places are difficult to predict. But would you say people are expecting this to come to fruition? So an opening within 3 to 5 years, Krista, would that be a fair window?
Yeah, I think that that's a good window. It is really hard to understand until the RFP process is closed. But, I think certainly in the timelines that we're looking ahead and considering, how it speaks to this in our strategic plan, that would be a reasonable window for sure.
Okay. Well, Krista, I want to thank you for joining us today. That's a really good dive into the local tourism sector and equally, as we talked about for the last few minutes, how it might experience some really strong growth. Thanks for being here, Krista.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your time.
That was Krista Marie LeClair, Executive Director of Kingston Accommodation Partners. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversations and got a good preview of the Kingston Business Journal, as well as the local economy in Kingston. Here are a few details, by the way, about the publication and how you can access it. Copies will be coming this week through Canada Post to all commercial addresses in the area. If you got a business, you should get one. There's 6,000 printed copies, and they'll actually hit Kingston, Frontenac, Napanee, and Gananoque. Copies will also be available at select racks across the city. For example, I think Kingston Economic Development will have 400 copies. And if you're looking to read the digital edition, please visit obj.ca/Kingston. Again, that's obj.ca/Kingston. Thanks for watching. Stay well, everyone. Bye-bye.